Hello, welcome back to my nervous breakdown. It's now been, according to my GoPro, nearly 5 minutes that I've been sitting here like an idiot waiting for my diesel heater to shut up so that I could start talking. We got there in the end. 5 minutes of my life that I will never get back. But during that 5 minutes, I have prepared my laptop with some questions because I invited my viewers to ask me some questions for a Q&A because I'm celebrating. I'm celebrating crossing the 500 subscriber threshold. I try not to make a big deal out of that because I don't want to jinx myself. And my God, I'm finding it a very slow and frustrating process trying to build my channel because I'm in a hurry and I'm very impatient and I want to have 1 million subscribers. The million thing just popped out of my mouth there. I was thinking more like 20,000 would be rather nice. I'd like to be a good, proper, established channel, and it's taking its bloody time. But I've just got to be patient. I've crossed the first major threshold, I guess, the 500. So in celebration, I invited you, my good viewers, to ask me some questions for this Q&A. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. The first 3 questions come from BookTube with Amy. Amy's lovely. She's been a friend for a while now. She was one of the first people that I made friends with when I started being a YouTube creator. And she's got a question or 3. And she says, I would love to know what coming out was like for you and how you did it. She doesn't beat around the bush, does she? I kind of say that I didn't so much come out of the closet as fall out clumsily and embarrassingly and not very clearly. I sort of did it in accidental, clumsy stages, and I did it first with my mum in the middle of a row. Actually, we were having a row about something. I was like, well, I'm gay, and it kind of came out in that sort of way, and then I had to explain to her that actually I was bi, and that was complicated and confusing. Being bi is so flipping difficult because you can't just simply say you're gay and people get it. People automatically assume that if you're bi, that means you can't make up your mind, you're undecided, or you're not a proper gay, or you're not you don't fit into any of the camps. Anyway, but coming out was very complicated. It happened in stages. There was never a moment that I made an announcement to anyone. And then when I started YouTubing, I decided right from the very beginning that I was going to wear a Pride t-shirt in my first video, and I was going to be openly gay right from the beginning and not make a big deal out of it, but at the same time not make a secret out of it either. So, and also bi. I mean, I was bi. I was always bi. In an early video, I talked about having a crush on Sam Hewn from Outlander, but I also talked about ex-girlfriends and females that I found attractive as well. So it's just organically part of who and what I am. I like both. In fact, I like all. I could be described as pansexual, except pansexual in the context of also liking trans men and trans women kind of implies that they're different from cis men and cis women, and there's sometimes some implied insult in that, so it's just easier to say I like all of them. I'm not limited by a person's gender or gender characteristics or anything like that. That's not what interests me. It's the mind of the person that I'm interested in, and I like all genitals because genitals are fun. Is it time to move on yet? Oh dear. Thanks, Amy. Anyway, moving on, we've got another question from Amy. I would love to know your favourite takeaway treat. Well, as you can see, my body is a temple. I have a magnificent physique, and I maintain this magnificent physique by the regular use of sandwiches and Pringles. and other crisps. In fact, actually, Pringles are quite low down on the list, or chips, potato chips, as Americans would call them. I like McCoy's, but I do like my snack food. I like sandwiches and crisps, savoury stuff. I like salty, savoury stuff, interesting and exotic flavours as well. All of that stuff floats my boat. But also, if I've got a sweet tooth, I'm kind of a biscuit-aholic. Yes, I do love a biscuit. Of the British variety, not the American variety. Cookies, I like that stuff as well. And I eat lots and lots and lots of them, as you can see. Moving on. The final question from Amy. Do you have a certain item of clothing that's lucky or something that brings you comfort at all? No. When I was in my 20s, I used to have my lucky underpants, and they were only my lucky underpants because I found it amusing to have some lucky underpants, and I suspect that they probably cycled through most of my underpants. There wasn't just one set. I just thought it was funny to have some lucky underpants, and I would reference them every now and then with my friends, but not really. I'm not a lucky clothing sort of person, although my husband would probably tell you, whilst rolling his eyes, that I'm somewhat superstitious. I'm constantly worried about being jinxed, constantly having to touch wood. Touch this wood quite often, and other wood, but we won't go there. And so I'm superstitious, but I don't have lucky clothing. Anyway, let's move on to another person's questions. This is Bookbound Weirdo, my friend Celeste. She's another booktuber. Amy's a booktuber. Celeste is a booktuber. Lots of these questions have come from people who I'm friends with from my previous incarnation, when I was doing BookTube on a regular basis. So Celeste asks, I guess this is kind of a more personal question, blah-de-blah-de-blah. I was curious how you got your diagnosis. This is my diagnosis of bipolar disorder and also Asperger's syndrome. I have both of these things. I'm diagnosed. Obviously, I've had them all my life. It took quite a while to get diagnosed, though. Again, because I grew up in the 80s, and it was a more ignorant time and a less tolerant time. So my bipolar got picked up first. Obviously, throughout my life and growing up, I was exhibiting symptoms, but I was seen as what at the time was labelled a problem child. I went to school in a classroom that had a sign on the door that said problem children. I was a problem, and I was a problem that they couldn't solve, which eventually led to me dropping out of school at the age of 14. But in my mid to late teens, I had some pretty bad episodes of bipolar, and by the time I was in my 20s, I was starting to realise that there was something quite seriously wrong with me. But it wasn't until I was, I think, 30 that I really sought help. And I had a major nervous breakdown and got some help. And also, it was complicated by the fact that I wasn't just bipolar, and that's where the second part of the diagnosis came in later, through a completely separate therapist who suggested that she believed that I had Asperger syndrome, and eventually, after lots of study and talking therapy and various uncomfortable observations, we arrived at the diagnosis of Asperger's, and that actually made perfect sense. And the combined diagnosis of bipolar and Asperger's really helps me to understand myself and look back at my life and understand why I was the way that I was. Unfortunately, it doesn't make life any easier. I still suffer from major symptoms of both of those things. And sometimes they mitigate each other. I mean, sometimes the symptoms that would be worse in one of those conditions are actually improved a little bit by the side effects of another condition. So sometimes they help each other. And in a strange sort of way, those two conditions are quite compatible. But in other ways, I really, really struggle. There is no easy answer to this question, Celeste, because it was a long and complicated process. It involved multiple therapists over multiple years, with nervous breakdowns in between, and lots of major psychological and emotional trauma. It was not easy. Moving on. Chris Dilly asks, do you have a day job, and how does your partner feel about you gallivanting all around the country? Well, the first part of that, I don't have a day job anymore. For many, many years, I worked in theatre, film and TV. I grew up in theatre. Both my parents were actors, and when I dropped out of school at 14, I immediately went to work in the local theatre, where I worked on dozens of productions, and I also worked on some movies and some TV shows. I was in showbiz for a long time, but eventually there came a point in my life after my diagnosis when I realised, now that I understand what's wrong with me and why I'm struggling so much, especially with human interaction, the best thing for me really would be to retire early and just try and live a peaceful, quiet life, to try and live my best life, rather than struggling and experiencing so much pain and trauma over and over again, because I just really wasn't getting along in the world of human beings. So although I'm passionate about the arts and I absolutely love theatre and film and TV, I just love all of that stuff, and I love actors, and I love musical theatre, and I love movies, and I really want to be a part of that world, and I always believed that I was going to be successful in the world of showbiz. But unfortunately, I've had to resign myself to the fact that my mental health just doesn't allow for that. I'm too unstable. And the only way that I can achieve any sort of stability at all, and any sort of peace of mind and tranquility, is to just remove myself from the human world and live a quiet life. I was a hermit for 20 years. I was housebound. Almost didn't get out of bed for 20 years. So YouTubing is my way of rejoining the world a little bit, trying to rejoin the human race in a small and controlled way, and in a safe way that's somewhat removed, because it's an online life. Because I struggle. I have a lot of problems in my noggin. Anyway, I hope that answers that. How does my partner feel about me gallivanting all around the country? It was his idea. He introduced me to VanLife, and for various practical reasons, he's not able to join me yet on the road, but he loves that I'm doing VanLife. We've got a very good system. We're in constant contact every day, morning and night. We're in constant contact. We Zoom constantly. And he's 100% behind me, and we're just waiting for the right time and for circumstances and practicalities to allow for him to join me on the road. He fully intends to join me on the road, and eventually this channel will be a couples channel. It will be both of us on the road together, and at that point it will probably be a lot more interesting, because there will be the interaction between the two of us. But at the moment, for practical reasons, he has to stay in the background doing his own thing, but he's with me 100% because all of this is his fault anyway. Roz at Scallydandling about the books has said, you have a very creative approach to your videos. Tell us something about your past experience. Well, I try and be creative. I'm constantly frustrated. I never feel that I'm creative enough. I have all sorts of ideas and inspiration floating around in my brain, and I find it very difficult transferring that onto the screen, partly because of lack of skill and talent, partly because of lack of equipment, partly because lack of finance, and also partly because of laziness to a certain extent. Sometimes it's just too hard, and I can't be bothered to set up all the equipment and go through all the rigmarole, because my moods are constantly fluctuating, and I'm struggling with mental health issues at the same time as trying to enjoy van life, and then filming it just adds an extra layer of difficulty on top of that. So sometimes I just don't have the energy. But I grew up in show business, so to a certain extent I have a background in that. Certainly I have a grounding in the whole process, and I studied filmmaking. I did actually study to be a filmmaker, and made some films, and later I was a television producer, so that background certainly helps as well. Although what I'm doing now, I've kind of had to go back to scratch and relearn everything right from square one, because being a YouTube creator is totally different from any of the stuff I've done in the past. Julie from Hungry Bookworm says, do you think you would ever decide to live full-time in Willy? Julie is certainly the filthiest-minded person that I am friends with online. She's got a very dirty mind and she's very horny a lot of the time. She seems desperate for me to do more nudity, and indeed when the weather gets nicer I plan to do more nudity, not because I think anyone will actually enjoy seeing that, but for purely comic effect. But anyway, Julie, if you can wait until the summer, there will be some nudity. But anyway, will I live full-time in Willy? No. I'm too unstable mentally to be able to sustain van life full-time. What I plan to do is continue making van life videos full-time, but I have to be able to return to my house, to my fortress of solitude, to my place of safety, to my home base, so that I can reset and recharge and have a bath, and also it's a much more comfortable place to edit. Excuse me. So I will be doing van life full-time in the extent that I will always, hopefully, be making van life videos, and I plan on travelling all around Europe and doing it properly in that sense, doing the travelling thing properly. But in between my travels I will still need to return home to reset and get my shit together, because nutter. Anyway, let's see what else she says. Again, sticking with the Willy theme, she says, do you see yourself replacing Willy with a bigger one? Or even going abroad with my Willy? Well, yes, as I said, I plan on going abroad. The whole point is I want to go abroad. I want to see exotic places. I want to travel all over Europe and see interesting and exotic places while I still can, because the motto of my channel, stolen from the Shawshank Redemption, is get busy living. So yes, I'll be going abroad with Willy, and it would be lovely to have a bigger Willy. And I mean that in every sense. John Marsden asks, have you been able to do any reading whilst enjoying the van life? Interesting question, John. I started off trying to do reading. One of the things that me and hubby do is we read together in bed. We're both big readers, and we each have our different books. We don't read the same book at the same time, although we have done that. But we like to read and every now and then discuss what we're reading. Maybe I'll read something, it makes me laugh, and then he wants to know why I'm laughing, and so I might read out the passage to him or describe it to him, and vice versa. We glance across at each other and have a little smile every now and then. It's just nice. We spend time together, but we also spend time with ourselves, but together. And so, yeah, the reading thing was part of van life to begin with, but then I became distracted by van life itself, and reading sort of fell by the wayside a little bit. I'm a mood reader, and I just found that I wasn't in the mood for reading for quite a long time. Just recently I've started reading again, and as part of my reset process, I'm back to reading the Empire trilogy again, because it's a favourite, it's reliable, I know exactly what to expect, and it's just lovely. And just the other night, I was reading the Empire trilogy, my husband was reading whatever it is that he's currently reading. It's a non-fiction, I can't remember what he was reading, something about trees. And yeah, so reading is kind of on and off a part of van life, but I must admit that doing van life is kind of distracting, and I prefer to read at home, in bed at home, or in the bath, and while I'm in the van I'm doing other things. John also asks, what places would you like to visit? Everywhere. Europe, of course, is my first idea. I just want to travel all over Europe. I want to go to hot places. It would be nice to get some winter sunshine. So, I'd like to head through France, down through Spain, Portugal, do all of that bit. But I really love North Africa. I've spent time in Egypt. I had the best time of my life in Egypt. So I'd like to kind of do that. So I'd like to cross over from Europe, drive through Morocco, perhaps. Certainly like to do Egypt again. And that's something that I'd like to do with hubby. I'd like to introduce him to Egypt. Yeah. Really, I don't want to put any limits on it. I'd also like to drive across America. I'd like to do Route 66. I had a lovely time in LA. I'd like to go back. I'd like to actually drive from east to west. I'd like to go to New York, see some shows in New York, and then drive right across to the West Coast and do that whole thing as well. My biggest problem, my biggest stumbling block at the moment is I can't actually afford financially to do van life. I'm living beyond my means. Well, just within my means if I don't go anywhere. I can afford the monthly payments for the van if I don't go anywhere, or at least if I don't go very far. If anyone has any ideas, if anyone wants to throw any money my way, that would be great. I don't like the begging thing. I don't like to feel like a beggar or the recipient of charity. But at the same time, I didn't really think it through. I got very excited about the idea of van life, but I had no clue how difficult it was actually going to be, and how tight the finances would end up being. So I have a lot less money to spend than I thought I would, and I'm having to spend a hell of a lot more on the van than I anticipated. So at the moment my van life is having to stay reasonably close to home, within easy reach of the place where I can reset and feel safe and do my editing, and also just not spend too much money on diesel. I would be very grateful if anyone has any suggestions or requests. What places in the UK would you like me to show you? What sort of videos would you like to see? Would you like more introspective stuff? Would you like to hear more about my internal thoughts and feelings and all the head noise? I can stream consciousness quite easily. So if you want to hear me streaming consciousness more and be more real, I can do that. Or if you want more performance-based stuff, more entertaining stuff, I can do that as well. I'm really open to anything. Tell me what you want, because I want to please my viewers. It's very important to me that this isn't masturbation. Obviously, I want to make films that I enjoy and that I can be proud of. I haven't quite achieved that yet, but I feel that I'm within reach of that. But really, the important thing is you guys. I'm very, very grateful for everyone who has subscribed and who watches my channel regularly. I get really lovely comments from lots of you, and that means so much to me because I have terrible insecurities and self-doubt. And so I need constant reassurance that I'm not wasting my time pissing into the wind and all of that stuff, tilting at windmills. That's it. I've run out of questions. Thank you very, very much, everyone who very generously contributed to this Q&A. Obviously, I couldn't have done it without you. I'm so grateful to everyone who subscribed to my channel and who contributes their comments on a regular basis. You're my reason for existing. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I probably don't say that enough, but I'm incredibly grateful to all the lovely, kind, warm people who have been supporting my channel through its various stages of evolution. And hopefully I will continue to grow. Hopefully I will get better at it. And just please keep watching, keep commenting. If you haven't subscribed already, please do that. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much. See you later.